about fears. Let's talk about love. Yeah, I got fears, but I ain't got no love.
So, today I'm going to have the opportunity to speak with Aphrodite Jones. For those of you who don't know who she is, you need to Google her. I became a fan of hers many years ago, before I ever met her, because she had a true crime show that I used to watch, True Crime with Aphrodite Jones. It ran for 5 or 6 seasons, I believe, and I'll get into this with her today, but it was a pioneering show for me in the true crime field. She has done it all. She's talented. She's smart. She's beautiful. She's one of these women that, or women, people, individuals that press on and follow their passion, which I loved so much. So, me and Aphrodite ended up meeting while I was just finishing The Hunt for the Zodiac Killer for the History Channel. And we had went to New Jersey and shot a television show sizzle reel, like a pilot episode, with the producers of 48 Hours, or the first 48. I'm sorry, John Kim. And that was the first time that I met her. And then she was gracious enough to come to my conference that I had, I believe in 2018, maybe 2019. We swapped books. We went out to dinner with Diane Lake also in tow, and Deb Hermanson, who wrote the book about Diane Lake. For you guys that don't know, she was the one of the youngest Manson family member. So you can imagine that dinner conversation. Me, Aphrodite, Deb, and Diane Lake from the Manson family. Got some pretty good stories that day for sure. So I was excited to have Aphrodite because I like her. We become friends, and I love her drive. So she has covered every major story there is. She's written numerous New York Times bestsellers. And again, her television show was just phenomenal. In plain Ken Main's terms, she gets shit done. And that's what I love about her. So, here you're going to listen to her. I think we're scheduled for an hour, but we'll see how long it is. It's simple as a phone call to Aphrodite or a text and say, hey, you want to come on the show? She said yes, because that's what friends do. And here she is. So with that said, listen to what she has to say. She has a new book. It's been out for a little bit now, but it's gaining some more traction. Very intriguing, called Levi's Eyes. You're going to hear all about it. 2020 did an episode on it, 48 Hours, I believe, as well. Dateline. Oxygen had a show on. She's covered this case from the beginning to the end, corresponded with the offender many times for a long period of time. She has a lot to say about the case. So stay tuned, watch it, and when it's done, please go to Amazon, Google Levi's Eyes, order her book, go to her website. I'm sure she has one, AphroditeJones.com, probably. I don't know. She's such a pioneer. I can't say enough good things about Aphrodite Jones. Treated me so well when we were in New Jersey. I was actually in LA when she called me, and we hooked up and did the sizzle reel. So she was just so very kind. And sometimes that's hard to find in that industry with some people. I've come to notice, but not her. She's genuine, and she's great. I can't say enough good things about her. So please go order her book. watch this interview first and then go order it. So with that said, hey, thanks for watching. Main's out. Okay, welcome back to Unsolved No More. So today I am with my beautiful and talented friend, Aphrodite Jones. And for those of you who don't know who she is, and I doubt there's going to be very many of you that don't know, you will know after this interview. Again, very talented, a pioneer, I believe, in the true crime genre. She was doing this shit long before any of you guys were doing it. And because of that, she has a lot of knowledge, a wealth of knowledge. And that's what I want to tap into today when we talk about her most recent book and case that she's looked into called Levi's Eyes. So with that, Aphrodite, I'm going to turn it over to you and we can get started right away on your new book.
Hey, Ken, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And yes, I have been doing this for over 30 years. And I just want to say that when I started, and back in time, probably for the first 10 to 15 years, people would ask me, why do you like this stuff? Why do you like murder and gore? And my answer always was the same, which is, I don't like it. I didn't choose it. It chose me. It was a calling. And to get into that for a moment, so people understand the history of this evolution, I was living in Eastern Kentucky, Appalachia. And at the time, I was a professor at a small college, but I also worked as a news director for the local radio station. And it just so happened that an FBI agent killed his lover, who was his informant. She got pregnant, was threatening to go to his wife. It was an affair. He killed her. He got away with it. The sister went to the police, went to the, all over the place, threatened to call Geraldo, etc. And bottom line, the FBI wound up giving a polygraph that he failed, and he wound up leading his colleagues to her bones in Kentucky. He had already moved now to the Miami office and was out of Eastern Kentucky.
Oh, wow.
And so that book became The FBI Killer, my first book, and that came out in 1992. I went on the Today Show with Bryant Gumbel and the sister of Susan Daniels Smith, the victim, and we were sideswiped and ambushed by the Today Show having the prosecutor on via satellite and, letting us know that, no, we had it all wrong and this wasn't true. But actually it is true, and it became the movie called Betrayed by Love with Patricia Arquette, a Lifetime movie that aired for years. So that was my foray into true crime. I really didn't anticipate that because, just so you know, I started writing professionally at the age of 21. And so I chronicled the evolution of cable television. And I was in that business while it was the wild, wild west of cable, just like we kind of instilled the wild, wild west of YouTube and, streaming, etc. And my desire was to become an actress. I studied acting. My desire was to be in Hollywood, and I lived out there. The last thing on my mind would have been writing about people who are dead and murdered and, in violent and crazy scenarios. So that's that.
Well, that is very interesting because I didn't know a lot of that about you. So on the actress side that you wanted to be, were you able to fulfill any of that? I mean, I certainly know I became aware of you watching you as a fan with True Crime with Aphrodite Jones. So was there anything other than that you did?
So back in time, I started with this acting thing when I was 19 years old. I went out to UCLA. I was a student there, and I was going on auditions. And then I studied with Lee Strasberg. And if you have any idea who that is, this is the man who trained Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, and Marilyn Monroe. He's long gone now. And so I was ready. I thought, oh my God, this is fantastic. I had the headshots, I had everything. Then I came back, didn't get anything in LA because all that happened out there was a thing called the casting couch.
Yeah.
So I was like, no. So I came back And I had been writing all along, and now I was published as a writer from the time I was 21, but I still wanted to act. So I continued with both. And then I discovered in New York that nobody wanted me. Everything I auditioned for, nobody wanted. The only thing I was chosen to do was to travel with a comedy company around the country, which I thought was bizarre because I don't think I'm very comical, but apparently perhaps I am. I don't know.
Right.
I guess I could be funny, but I just thought that was weird. With I was 120 pounds soaking wet. I was tall, statuesque. I thought I'd at least get a modeling thing, something, anything, and I got nothing.
Wow.
So, yeah. So, at that point, and again, there was some casting couch stuff in New York as well. And that's when I realized, you know what? I'm going to write because no one can take that away from me. And I have that God-given gift. And, I can't be accused of sleeping my way up to anywhere. And that was important to me. So, that's what I did. And in so doing with the column first, Cable View, and then later when I got to Kentucky, I did a PhD in literature at NYU, and they didn't stamp me out because they kept making me rewrite the dissertation for 5 years. And in the meantime, I was teaching in Kentucky, and that's when this murder happened, and that's when I wrote that book. And then that book led to a second book called Cruel Sacrifice, also near Kentucky, happened outside of Louisville, Kentucky, and Indiana. And that book became at the top of the New York Times list. And at that point, I said to the NYU people, you know what? Take your PhD letters and put them where the sun don't shine. I'm done. So, yeah, I mean, it is an evolution. And once Cruel Sacrifice was that much of a phenomenon, if you want to call it, and still sells to this day like crazy, then I was stuck with true crime. I really didn't want to do it. I mean, that book is a horrific story of 4 teenage girls who killed a 12-year-old girl and were smiling in their mugshots. It's bizarre. And it almost killed me to write it, honestly, Ken. I mean, it was just so dark.
Yeah, I remember reading that a while ago, probably when was the last time I saw you? Probably 5 years ago. And you gave me that book, and I remember reading it then, but when you said about the girl smiling, that brought it back to me a little bit.
Yeah. One of the worst teen violent crimes in the world ever. And in fact, E! did a whole thing on teen crimes, and they had the 20 worst teen crimes of all time. It came in at number 2, the first being the sniper in Washington, D.C., which made no sense to me because that kid sniper, if you remember that, was
Malvo.
an adult that was with him. So, but whatever, it is a horrifying story, and it really took the wind out of me, and I didn't want to write crime anymore. I was done. But then I hit the New York Times list, and then I kind of got pushed into the true crime genre. I couldn't get out of it. And then I wound up in Nebraska on a story that was about a transgender girl who became a boy who was murdered because of that hate crime, and it was a triple homicide. And at that time, Ken, the word transgender was not in the vocabulary in America.
Right.
It didn't exist. In fact, in the book, I referred to being transgendered because that's the only way you could find it in medical books. There was no such thing as transgender at that time. Anyway, that book inspired the movie Boys Don't Cry.
I was going to say Tina Brandon, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Or Brandon Tina, whichever way you like. And what happened, too, is that once many years have gone by and the transgender movement has gotten so big, I noticed that there were comments on my, book page on Amazon saying all she wanted, and it was a S with the H-E different colors, so it was like a she, he, but nobody uses that anymore. And, it's considered offensive, which is fine. They just didn't have words for it back in time. But I did decide to change the title to All He Wanted because I realized that this person was trapped in a female body from the time he was a child. And in fact, when Caitlyn Jenner was coming out back in time and we all knew him as Bruce Jenner, the only thing I could think of in that first interview was, if he doesn't go back to his childhood, this isn't real. And sure enough, he was on with Diane Sawyer, and he started talking about when he was 3 years old. And that is real. Now, what's going on today with transgender and being a trend, or I'm not sure, with all this crazy sex reassignment surgery for kids, that it's gotten out of hand, in my opinion.
Right.
But when I did write that book, and then it inspired Boys Don't Cry, that was the cinching of my true crime career. And but again, it's very, very difficult, Ken. I'm sure. I know you. We know each other. How many cases you've tracked that are unsolved, that, you haunt you at night, that haunt you in the day,
Yeah, absolutely.
People don't realize how difficult it is when you are actually in it doing work in this field.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think sometimes that's why you need to take a break, and that break has got to be longer than like a week.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Well, I didn't write a book. I covered the Michael Jackson trial. I wrote Michael Jackson Conspiracy. That came out in 2007. And then I went into television for my show. Didn't write a book again until now, Levi's Eyes, which is my newest book and happens to be probably my best book. It took me 4 years of research and writing to get that book out, which for me is extremely long, but it turned out to be my best book. So I'm pleased with that.
Yeah, well, before we get into Levi's Eyes, tell me about True Crime with Aphrodite Jones and how that came about. And it's still in production today, right? I mean, at least in reruns, I see it.
Yeah, it's in reruns, and you can get it on Netflix or any streaming service, and Discovery Plus and ID Go, all that good stuff. But yes, so I had 6 seasons of that show, which is pretty good, I think.
Yeah.
And the show aired around the world, still does, 90 countries. And how did I sell that show? Well, again, this kind of goes back to my actress days, where it was always my desire not just to be an actress or to be on the tube or the screen, but to do something with that, to be some kind of an activist. I always used Jane Fonda as a role model, although her whole Hannah Jane, I didn't know back in time. I wasn't really, I was 5 years old or whatever when that all happened, but she's an activist, and I wanted to do that. And so as it happened, it worked out this way. I became the activist through my writing and through the work in true crime. So when I went to the Investigation Discovery, at that time, it was brand new. People never heard of it. You couldn't get it on your TV. And I sold a 10-episode season based on covering some of the biggest crimes in the world, in this country anyway. So my first season was O.J. Simpson. It was Phil Spector. It was, big stories. Michael Jackson. And, I could go on and on with the list. Some of my books, which I had done, The Perfect Husband, which Michael Peterson's story. I did the Scott Peterson story. And Lacey. So, that first season was, bing bang, and people loved it. I got the biggest ratings that ID had at the time. So, of course, they renewed it. And I went on to do another 5 seasons. I have more murder cases through that than I can know what to do with, because as you know, Ken, when you get into one murder case, in order to really focus on one that you feel you can either solve or do something with that's meaningful, you're looking at perhaps 30 others before you get to that one.
Right. Well,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I guess what I want to know is, personally, did you enjoy that? The show experience? Oh,
absolutely.
Did you?
I was in my glory because, I had teams of producers. Peacock was producing it, NBC. My offices were in 30 Rock. Couldn't have asked for more in my life. And at this, but at the same time, I knew, hey, there's only going to be so much TV you're going to do. Everything comes to an end. And I knew one day I'd go back to writing. It doesn't mean I've given up on anything on the screen. I plan to do something at least streaming anyway, out of my home, if that's the case. But no, when you're doing television, you're not as ingrained in each story. So you're not getting the your blood boiling to the same degree as when you're focused on one particular story or case, as you are, and you become so entwined with it, with the victims, with the killer, well, you don't deal with the killer, but I do. At the court, at the trial, at the police, and getting the documents and going through the whole rigmarole. It's very involved. And, television, there's other people who were doing this for me. I didn't have to really do anything other than, agree to certain cases and ask for certain elements and decide who it is that I felt were the most important people to talk to within the episodes. So, but I had to fight for that show, Ken.
I bet.
I had to fight for that show. It wasn't like, oh, la-di-da, and I thought, no. It was a whole production, and then the original producer really didn't know what he was doing. I don't want to name names, but it became an issue, and then we got a different team of producers for season 2, and then finally for seasons 3 through 6, it was Peacock, and they know what they were doing. So I had it much easier. The first couple seasons, it was hard because I had a particular idea in terms of telling the story through like a big symbol, a major symbol that could be utilized in the story, because that's kind of how I write my books. And we started to do that, but then it got morphed into, they forgot all about that.
Well, yeah, I do know.
Go ahead.
But I know how television is too, not to the degree, obviously, that you do. But it's hard to get a show. Now, I've never pitched a show like you did. They came to me, but it's still, I've had a lot of producers come and pitch me their idea, and then they go and pitch it to the network. And, the one out of, it seemed like 10 would get any traction.
Or less.
Right. And, but I'm glad to hear that about Peacock, because that is my next show is going to be through them. So I'm glad to hear that they know what they're doing.
Oh, do you have something brewing?
Yeah, I got green lighted last week.
Oh my God, congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. It's so
excited for you.
It's they're still trying to keep it under wraps a little bit, but it is through Dick Wolf, who I guess is pretty big in true crime out there. I'm not...
True, big, huge.
Yeah, I don't know much about it because I don't watch TV that much anymore since you went off the air, but... but no, it's going to be a good show. Right now it's just 3-episode limited series, but we'll
that's awesome, Ken. Bravo. I tell you, that is a huge accomplishment. Huge.
Well, that's what I say. It's hard, it seems, to land a show anymore.
Well, it's always been hard, believe me. It's harder now, I think, because the true crime market is flooded, but at the same time, there seems to be an endless appetite for it. But even so, nobody wants to take a chance on buying 10 episodes anymore. It's 3, it's limited, it's 5,
right,
whatever. But that is awesome.
Yeah,
that is awesome, and you will love the Peacock people because they do know what they're doing.
That's good to hear. I was surprised that the show that me and you pitched together with John Kim never went anywhere either. I was very surprised at that.
Yeah, well, we were doing Unsolved, and a lot of times, I'm sure that's got to be something within what you're doing, but a lot of times, at that time, they had too many Unsolved, In Pursuit type shows, and they felt that, I remember I spoke to the head of the network, Henry Schleif, at the time, and he said, we just have too many of this type of show we've bought and are in the hopper, so that was the reason.
Yeah.
So I was told. Who knows?
Right. All right, well, let's... get away from television and let's go back to books and Levi's Eyes. Now, I've read up on it a little bit, and I didn't get that book from you yet. It might be in my box, but I haven't been able to read the whole thing. But the gist of it, I'm going to let you explain, and then I'll chime in. So why don't you go ahead?
Okay. So this is a story I actually covered on my series for ID, and it's about a man, Levi Karlsen, who killed his 23-year-old son. And first of all, to kill your own biological son is, very, very unusual. Levi, he had him go under his truck, under a truck that was jacked up, a 3,000-ton truck. And then he literally got into the truck and tipped it over like a wheelbarrow onto his son and crushed him and left him there, and then got in a car with his second wife and went off to a funeral one of her family members had on 45 minutes away. And then when they got back from that funeral, voila, he found Levi. Oh my God, call the 911. Levi was long dead, and he thought he was going to get away with that. And he did get away with it for almost 3 years, 4 years, he got away with it. Because his second wife never suspected that he could have possibly done that. It just wasn't in the realm of what could be in her mind. And she had her own kid with him. She was raising Levi and his two sisters from Carl's first marriage. But the thing is, Carl's first marriage, his first wife died in a tragic fire in California. And when that happened, he was a hero because he went in and got his 3 children. He rescued Levi and his sisters, Erin and Katie, from that fire, and then moved to New York where his family was so they could help in raising his children with no mom. And then he found his second wife, Cindy Best, and Cindy stepped in as the stepmother, and they ultimately had a 4th child together. And so Cindy looked at Carl as a hero. There were newspaper articles from California talking about that. And it wasn't until many years later, after Levi died, that she started putting some pieces together. And she started having panic attacks because now she's realizing she's sleeping with a killer.
Well, that would give just about anybody a panic attack.
You think? I mean, as an aside, there's a company, I'm not going to say who it is, that bought the rights to the Gilgo Beach serial killer's wife for almost $1 million.
Wow.
Now, I don't know that that's right.
Yeah, I do.
But I think that the reason for something like that is, and it's controversial, is that how many people live with a serial killer and have no idea they're living with a serial killer?
A lot.
And then they find out, and now they're in it.
Right.
That's a very strange position to be in, and there aren't a lot of people that are ever in that position. So be that as it may, her story, I'm sure, will be pretty fascinating, and they're going to follow her through the trial of the Gilgo Beach killer. Getting off topic, back to Carl. So now Carl is collecting insurance on his son. And he brings that to his wife and says, I can't believe this. Levi had an insurance policy. I didn't know anything about it. And, I'm going to check it out and see if it's real. And, of course, who do you think took the insurance policy out on him?
Right.
He brought Levi to the insurance agent and had Levi take out the policy because Levi was divorced and had 2 little girls, and he wanted them to be cared for. And Levi made his father the sole beneficiary because he was now divorced, and his ex-wife was money hungry and would have taken that money, and had anything happened to Levi, she would have spent it on whatever, not necessarily the kids or save it for college. So he let his father be the sole beneficiary. And weeks after that policy was signed, Levi died in this tragic accident.
Yeah, it was like 13 days, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and that morning, that same morning, Ken, he took Levi. They met at the bank in town and up in the Finger Lakes region, which is where he was from. And they met at a bank so that Levi wrote a handwritten will, little tiny piece of paper, and signed it in front of the notary, and they stamped it out that he was leaving all his earthly possessions to his father. So in addition to the fact that the insurance policy was already giving everything to Carl, I guess, wanted additional proof that whatever was there was going to be his, because Levi didn't have a home or anything else. And so they signed that document and had it notarized that morning. And when he got back later that afternoon, he found Levi dead in the barn.
Well, see, this is one of the things that I don't understand in investigations is when you come out to a scene like that. Let's say I was on patrol and I come out there and see this. It's an accidental death, okay? That's immediately kind of what you think because you see a grieving family member or whatever. But doesn't anybody connect the dots, like to go to doesn't the bank, somebody in that bank that works, see the obituary and say, oh, wait a second here. They were just in here. Doesn't the life insurance policy people say, hey, they just took this out like 13 days ago? And don't they contact the police? Because if they don't, none of this ever comes together, right?
Well, and yes, you're right. And you wonder. It certainly makes you wonder. Now, in the case of Levi, remember, he took out the insurance policy himself. And yes, his father was a beneficiary, but it's very hard to put those pieces together.
But how much was that? That was $700,000?
$700,000.
That's a lot, right?
You bet. Yeah, a lot.
So, I mean, when you get an amount like that, you'd think it would raise some red flags.
You would think, but it didn't, because Carl is a very smooth con artist, and he's able to talk his way through anything. So when he was questioned about that, and he was questioned by State Farm, he decided he would roll over all of the income into annuity accounts with State Farm, so that the agent who was handling the life insurance policy now was able to handle that money and collect his commission on the $700,000.
Wow.
So, yeah. So he had a plan in advance with his buddy at the life insurance company.
Did that guy ever get in trouble for anything?
So once Cindy Best, the second wife, realized what was going on, she reported him. She wanted the police to report him. And they did go, somehow there was a formal letter sent to State Farm, but they didn't do anything about it because there's no proof about what this guy did or didn't do.
Right.
So that went nowhere. But what I can say to you on that subject, Ken, is that the bizarre thing about this story is that Carl took out life insurance policies on Levi's daughters, his granddaughters, who were little girls at the time of Levi's death. So with the money from Levi's life insurance policy, he not only took annuities out in his name and Cindy's name, he also took out life insurance policies to the tune of $350,000 a girl for his two little granddaughters.
So it's a good possibility he had plans for them?
Oh, of course.
Wow.
Of course. There was going to be another accident. There's no doubt in my mind.
Wow.
But the thing is, what I couldn't understand is, and had no idea, I didn't know you could write an insurance policy on a child. Not even your own child. Your grandchild. I mean, that's bizarre to me.
Yeah. Well, what happened with then, and I'm sure you're going to get into this, but I want to say it before I forget. He had, in 1991, I think, a previous wife, which died in a fire, and he got life insurance for that. But what sticks out to me is, didn't you say that this with Levi happened in New York?
Yeah.
So that's very common, I found, with offenders. He went from the furthest place that he could go from California without going overseas, right, to New York. That's where he moved to?
Exactly.
Ah, that's crazy.
And you have to remember this, too. In 1991, and that was New Year's Day, so in essence, really 1990, there were no reciprocity between agencies. There were no, obviously no internets, no cell phones, nothing like that. Very little reciprocity. So, and he knew that. So he left California 3 days after his wife's memorial service and was gone to New York. Now, the authorities in San Andreas County, California, Calaveras County, rather, San Andreas is the town, went after him and were doing a fire investigation. And they found and could see enough evidence that this fire was in fact caused by a human being. It was not an accidental fire. However, as that research was being done and collected, Carl had moved, as you say, far away as possible, and with the kids. And the DA in Calaveras County, it's a small county. It's way up north in California, a Sierra mountain range, and they didn't have the money to allow their investigators to fly to New York and question Carl. So unfortunately, that went by the wayside. Nowadays, I doubt that would ever happen. First of all, you can make internet and whatever, so there's no question about that. But I mean, they couldn't afford to go after him.
But they suspected him. They suspected him right away with that fire. It wasn't like years later or anything.
Nope. They suspected him right away.
Okay.
And they found evidence of a second pour of kerosene, and also, a lot of weird things had happened there. He was interviewed by fire investigators in those couple of days. He had claimed there was a kerosene pour in the house days prior to the fire, and that it was the cat and the dog were playing with each other and knocked over a 5-gallon jug of kerosene in the hallway. Now, how that happens and why there's kerosene in the house, he claims this bizarre explanation of they didn't have running water. So at the time, the pipes froze because they do get snow up there, and there was some snow. And he said that because the pipes froze, they had to carry water in the house in order to use the toilet or bathroom, whatever. And carrying that water in the house, he used kerosene jugs from work that he finished the kerosene, and then he put water in it. And so his wife brought that jug in thinking it was a jug of water, and that's how kerosene came to be in the house, and that's how it came to spill all over the hallway.
Yeah, that's all.
I mean, think about that. What would you do as an investigator if somebody was telling you this?
Well, usually it's my experience that if shit doesn't add up, there's a reason.
Exactly.
Exactly.
I mean, he's trying to get away with explaining to the investigator that, the investigator's trying to get this straight. So you change from kerosene to water and back to kerosene in the same jug. Well, not all the time. Only in emergencies.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, it's ridiculous. What did the autopsy report say? Anything about smoke inhalation or anything?
Yeah, she died from smoke inhalation. There was a little problem, which is he couldn't get to her because the window was boarded up in the bathroom, and she was in the bath when the fire occurred. And the window was boarded up because it had broken the few days before, and she actually helped him nail the plywood to that window.
So certainly premeditated.
Of course. He had taken the life insurance out on her. There's a lot more to it, but bottom line is that this is why everybody was suspicious. There was no question. The windows boarded up. He created a coffin for her.
Right.
There was no question on the part of investigators that he did this, but they couldn't nab him.
Right, and that's important on a lot of cold cases. I tell people that all the time. It's not what you know, it's what you can prove. Because there is plenty of cold cases out there that investigators know who did it. They just don't have the evidence.
Right, exactly.
So he commits this crime, and then what? He just hightails it out of there with the kids?
Exactly. And her family, Christina Karlsen, the first wife, is very well aware that this is, beyond fishy, that this is the windows boarded up. He clearly didn't make an attempt to save her. They were having financial issues, etc. And they were fighting, and the sister knew that they were fighting, and Christina wanted to leave Carl and all of this. So all that was in place. However, when he moved to New York with his 3 children, who he saved out of the house, he And he met Cindy Best. The family, some of those family members from his first wife came to visit New York and meet Cindy and see how the kids are doing. And they allowed Cindy to marry this man who they believed was a stone cold killer.
Huh.
Without telling her anything about it. So, think about that for a minute. I mean, that's
right.
I mean, that just is so wrong. But again, because they appeared, it made Cindy believe, oh, everything is cool. Like poor Carl, his wife died. Poor Carl, he has to raise his kids on his own. And of course, he's very good at creating sympathy for himself because he's a narcissist. He's a sociopath.
Yeah, and you actually interviewed him and talked to him a number of times, right?
So I spent a first year talking with him 5 days a week before and after and during the trial, which is bizarre because no killer wants to talk to you before their trial. But this guy did because he is a complete wacko. And then COVID occurred right after the trial. He was convicted of killing his first wife. And I'm not going to get into how that happened. I think you should read the book. But there were heroes involved in that who later came and testified. But after he was convicted, because of COVID, he was stuck in the jail in Calaveras County for almost a year. And what was important about that is in prison, and you've dealt with prisoners, I think I certainly have in prisons and gotten calls and gone to see them, etc. over the years. You have limited access, like the phone. You're going to have limited access to the phone because other people are waiting for the phone. There's only so much time. There's thousands of people in the jail, whatever, in the prison rather. But in the jail, people come in and out overnight for DUI or whatever. So he was the king of that jail, and he had complete access for an hour, 2 hours at a time on that phone because no one was using it. So we did 15-minute increments because that's what you do. They cut you off after 15 minutes, but we did at least an hour every day, 5 days a week. And because of the COVID thing, that continued. So it was almost 2 years that I was talking with him. And can I have to tell you, getting into that mind was one of the scariest things I ever faced.
Well, tell me about that. First of all, tell me how did it come about that you started having contact with him, and how did he accept that?
Well, that's another story. So I was at the time doing a podcast with Jesse Buttafuoco, as in Buttafuoco, Joey Buttafuoco, and that whole story, if you're not pretty sure if you remember it.
Yep.
And so I was doing a podcast with her, and it was a trial thing, and we had recorded a number of them, about 5 of them, and it became clear to me that she had no respect for me or my work, nor did she have any contacts with anyone. It was all her using me for, her own gain, whatever she wanted, her own TV show, whatever it was. And I realized that at that time, I got in contact with Cindy Best because I had done the story with my own show. And I knew there was still that first wife this murder had never been solved, that was still hanging in the wind. So when I got in touch with Cindy Best to be on the podcast, I found out subsequent that the trial had yet to have happened for Levi Karlsen, which was amazing because this was in 2019, and I had done the show with her in 2014. I had no idea. When I found out that thing was scheduled for January of 2020, I said, okay, this is it. This is my book. And, I was able to convince her because she wanted to write her own book and da-da-da. We were back and forth on it. I said, Cindy, let me tell this story. You're not, you're hiring writers that can't do what I do. And so I was able to convince her because she really just wanted her story told. She was very misunderstood. The book, something within this book happens to be how she got hoodwinked and why she was hoodwinked by this sociopath. And when she was living with a killer, what she lived through and how she trapped him. And that story has never really been told. So there's something there. And like I say, I was going to do the podcast, then I realized why am I going to do a podcast about this? Doesn't make sense. This story is way too big for just a podcast. I got myself together. I went to the trial. But to answer your question more particularly is I had Cindy write to Carl. And Carl is so crazy that he wrote back to Cindy telling her that he still loved her and that he didn't blame her. She's the one who trapped him and wore a wire for the police.
Right.
Okay. And got him to confess to killing his son.
Yeah, I watched that part.
So, I mean, how he didn't blame her, again, goes to the insanity, the lunacy of this person. And she, said this person, this, New York Times bestselling author is going to contact you, going to give you her address, blah, and, we'll get in touch with her. And then I did, and I, gave him the information, told him, give me the information so you can call me from jail, and we did that. And I was stunned in the beginning because the trial hadn't happened in California. He was out there waiting to be tried. And the only reason it hadn't happened is his lawyer quit the day before the trial was scheduled that August because of some confidential reason that was sealed by the judge. So who knows, Crazy Carl, what he did to that lawyer or said. But because of that, it had to be started all over again. And so the trial didn't happen until January of 2020. And I was able to get out there and, witness it and be, interview and meet with the investigators, some of whom I'd already interviewed for my show. So that's how that happened. It was kind of meant to be, I think.
Well,
And,
then when you got in there and into his mind, what did you find?
So a lot of times when you're dealing with a killer, they talk in circles. There's I don't know how to express this. They're able to take anything that you're saying and twist it into something else.
Right.
And when they're doing that, it just so happens if you're schooled in how to talk to these people, that you can pull out certain details that they don't realize they're revealing in their circular conversations.
Sure.
And I'm sure you know that as an investigator. I'm sure you've dealt with that.
I sure have.
Right? So, the technique is always, you're the good guy, you believe them, la la la, but let's hear this, let's hear that. And of course, in my case, I don't need to get a confession out of him. I just need to find out what led up to things. What was his childhood like? What was his first marriage like? What was this? What was that? What was he like as a father? And the more he's telling me these details, I mean, their horses died in a strange fire. His car blew up in another fire.
And all these are insurance related, I bet.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
And then, oddly enough, beyond anything in the world, is that he was in the Air Force when he was married to his first wife, Christina. They were stationed in Grand Forks, North Dakota. And while there, he was on the team for nuclear warheads, driving the actual vehicle that held a nuclear warhead to the silos where they were kept in North Dakota, Wyoming, and that area.
Wow.
So think of this. Now, this is a person who is an absolute wacko, right? This is before he killed his wife. And he is driving around warheads, nuclear missiles, with a convoy.
Insane.
Insane. I mean, I actually incorporated the military document in the book so people could see it because you wouldn't believe it.
Wow.
So one of the things he talked a lot about was his time in the Air Force and his, he pretended that he was like in the special ops. He was not. He was a driver. But he liked to pretend that he was still in touch with and, aware of what was going on with nuclear warheads in America. So he lived in a fantasy world of the past with delusions of grandeur for sure, but yet some of it was real. Because the thing I incorporated into the book was a commendation letter for him because, get this, his truck wheel, one of them, went on fire with the nuke in it, and he was able to stop the convoy and put the fire out. Now, I mean, I know. What do you say to that?
Right.
I don't know if it gets any crazier than that, honestly. But this is a person who desperately wanted to be famous, desperately wanted to be successful, and who, by any means necessary, was going to do that.
Well, so initially what I'm thinking here, everything on the surface anyhow sounds like he killed, two people, his two family members, really for financial gain. Now, is that what it is, or did he kill the kid because the kid witnessed something?
So, hence the title Levi's Eyes, right? And I don't want to give it away, but there was a confrontation between Levi and his father many years later, and there was an accusation, and so Carl was living with that.
I see.
And so really the reason behind the murder, I think, was twofold. I mean, he figured, well, I'll get the money, but also I'll get rid of a potential witness or anything that's causing me grief,
How old was Levi when his mom was killed?
I think it was 5. Don't quote me, but I believe
around
his sister
that
was
age?
6, almost 7. He was 5, almost 6.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. And, of course, kids at that age don't really know what they're seeing. And I have to say, there's no absolute proof of what he did or did not see, but you will see as the story unfolds how that's possible.
Well, what was
You
his...
have to remember, Carl is a very good con artist.
Right.
Very easy to con your little children who are 4, 5, and 6 years old, in essence, or 3, 4, and 6 years old, to have no thoughts about you doing anything wrong. You saved them.
Right.
From the fire.
Well, I'm curious to know what his relationship was with Levi growing up. Was everything kosher with them?
So, Levi was a very inward person who was shy and did not show emotions, and there were a lot of problems with him in school as far as being able to keep up, and he had to have special tutors, and he was in counseling when they first got back to New York, to Romulus, New York, which is where Carl is from. And that's the Finger Lakes region, very beautiful up there. And so Levi was somebody who they had to treat with kid gloves, and with kid gloves meaning if he needed therapy, then it was therapy. If he needed tutors, then it was tutors. You see pictures of him where he's looking quite sad and keeping to himself. And Cindy would always say that she tried to get him out of his shell and did some of that. But really what happened when Levi got into high school, he met a young woman who was into the goth scene, and suddenly he found a place for himself with her. And he became, a goth, wearing the spiked collars and the black, and not black fingernails or any of that, or makeup, but doing as much as he could to stand out as, an oddball, or whatever you want to call.
Right.
I don't know what you call gothic people. To me, they're odd, but no one's allowed to say anything anymore, right, Ken?
Right.
I don't know. To me, it's bizarre, but okay. So, and I've dealt with goths before in a different book that I wrote called The Embrace, and one day we could talk about it. But nonetheless, at that time when he was in that phase, Carl was furious with Levi because he got married young, he got the girl pregnant, he knew it wasn't going to last, he was angry at his son couldn't hold down a job, now he was having kids he couldn't afford, and then he got himself a house through the HUD housing program, which he couldn't afford, which Carl was furious about because it was a 100-year-old house that had bad electrical wiring. And what do you think happened to that house of Levi's?
No, please don't tell me.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
Wow.
Oh yes.
So it never ends with Carl, anyhow.
It doesn't end. But you see, in that case, there was something odd that went on there. And when you see how that evolved, it seems that Carl was not there. In fact, he has a true alibi, so he wasn't there.
Wow.
So now what? It's odd. Their relationship is very odd all the way. And then right before Levi died, in the year or so after the divorce, when he was fighting for his daughters in custody and all of this, and he couldn't get full custody, and he didn't have a good job, Carl cozied up to his son, and they had the best relationship of their lives, because Carl got him a job at Guardian Glass, a huge glass company upstate, and he had now benefits, and he had good pay, and he had got his own apartment now. First he was living with Carl and Cindy, and then he was able to move out on his own, get his apartment, and get his life back on track. And the reason that Levi did decide with his father to take out the insurance policy was because he wanted to show the courts that he was doing everything possible to take care of his daughters so that he could have access to them without unsupervised visitation. So, I mean, it kind of makes sense, and it certainly made sense to Cindy at the time, because she knew the squabble and the horror that Levi went through with his ex-wife, Cassie. She also knew about how they handled an insurance claim on the house of theirs that burned down. And there were just a lot of weird things there. And so she didn't question it, because Carl was just so good with his son. And in order for Carl to get Levi that job, though, Levi had to agree, no more metal, no more piercings, no more, everything has to come out. You can't go in, for interviews with goth look and all of that, and spike collar on your neck. And so he got Levi straightened out, and they had the best talks together in that time. I mean, he was, counseling Levi on the divorce and what to do, because the woman was cheating on Levi, and etc. And she'd already now found another husband, and the other husband was playing daddy to his girls who he couldn't see. So there were a lot of issues there. And Carl was very good at advising Levi and helping Levi.
Well, do you think that he helped him as far as, hey, this is an easy way to obtain money? I've done it at least 3 different occasions. He set fire to your house. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, yes, obviously he saw that. But again, there's something beyond just the money.
Right.
And the precarious nature of the relationship. One of the questions in this book that I try to answer is, why would Levi get under a truck that is jacked up with a railroad jack, which is very narrow, if you know anything about that, not a regular car jack, did not have concrete blocks under it. And Levi was not somebody who worked on trucks. It's not like he did this regularly. This was the only time he was ever asked to do this. And he was asked to do this on the same day that he signs his will.
Right.
Why would Levi have gotten under that truck? I mean, if he knew something, right?
Right. That's a good question. And as I sit here and try to ponder it, immediately, my mind goes to, he had, for some reason, absolute confidence in his dad being a dad. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, yeah, and this is what a sociopath is able to do. They are able to convince somebody, and it's insidious. They do it through not obvious ways, because you're going around the circle, around the corner, And, again, this is why he almost got away with murder, not once, but twice.
Well, what gets me is that from, I guess, my limited experience, but I still have experience knowing that if that jack fell, that's not going to, if it's just a regular truck, it's not going to kill that kid right away. He's going to suffer. He's going to suffocate. I looked at, I don't know if you know who Steve Prefontaine is, but he was an Olympic runner, set all these track records. So, I mean, his lungs had the capacity to hold more air than almost 99% of the people on Earth. And he was in a car wreck where his car rolled over on him, and witnesses tried to pull it off of him, and he was still breathing. So my analogy there in comparison is that Levi, I am sure, was still alive and still could have been treated or saved by his dad, right?
Well, yes. And that's the thing. He never admitted to killing his son. What he admitted to was causing the truck to fall on his son and leaving the scene knowing that his son would die. That's what he admitted to.
Well, to me, that's a pretty good confession. And I don't know which one's worse, causing the accident or leaving him to die. You know what I mean?
Well, that's even worse.
Yeah, you're right.
But it's then it was murder too. So he only got, I think it was
15, yeah,
or 25. So he made his deal with the devil on that. And yeah, it's actually worse, right, than just saying, okay, the truck fell on my, I killed my son or whatever. Whatever admission I made, but when the truck fell, he just died immediately. I didn't know. I didn't realize something. No. He didn't do that.
Right.
He said, the truck fell, and then I freaked out, so I just left. And the judge asked him, are you aware that would have caused that that he would die, that would cause his death if you were to leave the scene? Yes, I'm aware. He made the plea deal already. So think of that, like you say. I mean, what a horrifying way to die.
Absolutely, especially when you're under there thinking, hey, my dad's out there under, around this truck somewhere. Where is he? He's going to help me any minute. And nothing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Exactly. Yeah, and he runs off like the absolute snake that he is and monster that he is. And, luckily now he's in prison for life without parole. And he does continue to contact me every now and then.
I was just going to ask you that.
He wants me to be a witness to something that happened in the story that I don't want to get into here. You'll see it if you read the book, but there's a peculiar happening on the day that Levi died. And when Carl found out about it, I got it from police reports. He wanted a copy of that affidavit. He wanted the deposition. He wanted to use that to prove that, all of this was a mad mistake. And any event, he still hounds me about that. He wants this document. And it's like, okay, you made a plea deal. How do you think you're going to get out of this?
Right. So but he trusts you.
Yes and no. I don't know if he's read the book.
Right. I'm sure somebody had to tell him, right?
He has family in the Finger Lakes, and they just ran the cover of that book 2 weeks ago on the front page of the Finger Lakes Times.
I see.
So I feel like he has read the book. I think that, one of his letters to me was very angry, and he wanted this document. So I wrote back and I said, you're going to be angry. It's not going to help. I'm not going to do anything for you.
Right.
So then he writes back, if you want sugar, here's sugar. Can I please have that?
And I'm sure you threw up in your mouth.
You're right. You're so right. So, but yeah, I never spoke to him again once I started writing the book. That was my cutoff in my mind. I was like, okay, you are done. I am done with you. I am done with your circular, ridiculous stuff that you talked about. I've dragged everything out of your crazy brain that I can, and I'm ready to put it all down on paper, and just let people who read this book, I will say this, and this story is a known story. It's been covered on many things. I've been on 2020 with it. It's been on Dateline, yada, yada, my show, Oxygen shows, you name it. But the thing is that it's the inside of this guy's brain that is what's so fascinating about the story, because you can't imagine the levels of depravity that somebody like this could have and admit to,
right,
through their commentary. It's just stunning, frankly. And when people read it, they do say to me, I had to keep going back to the pictures to make sure this was actually real.
wow.
And that's how far out this story is once you're inside that crazy man's mind.
Well, why don't you tell everybody where they can purchase this book at?
So it's on Amazon. That's really the best way to get it. And it's $9.99, which is the least price I can sell it for. If you have Kindles, you can get it on Kindle. If you're Kindle Unlimited, you can get it. People are eating it up. People actually, they're buying it all over the world now, in England, Australia, here. I did do a show with Piers Morgan on it when the book was first released last fall, and it's just been a real, I don't know. I mean, it's been a phenomenon that I didn't expect.
Yeah. Well, again, I want to thank you for all that you've done, not just for this book, but in your career. I think sometimes when, quote unquote, pioneers, and I hope that doesn't make you feel old, but I really feel that you are, especially, as a woman being in that genre. So, 30 years. I thank you, and I hope that you get the proper recognition as you continue to do your thing. It's just so important, and I'm so blessed to have met you and become friends with you, and that means a lot to me. So I thank you for that.
And I thank you, Ken. I feel the exact same way about you. You are a gem. You are a star, and I am so thrilled that you're going to have a show with Peacock. I truly am. I cannot wait. Can't wait.
Well, I appreciate it. Anything else that you want to say to my viewers? And, of course, I will put a link to your Amazon book and the description and all that.
And to my website. I'm doing TikTok a little bit these days, and commented about the Karen Reed trial and also about the Alec Baldwin trial. If anybody wants to, check that out. I've got some different ideas about what went on there than the average, I think. I tend to be controversial, Ken.
Well, that's one of the reasons that I've liked you all these years, is because you're like me in the fact that, hey, we call a spade a spade. There's no bullshit. That's the way it is. And if people don't like it, you're not trying to offend anybody. But if they happen to be offended, well, then so be it.
Exactly. So you got to do that in life, I believe.
There's so many. No, you're 100% right. And there's so many other things that I want to talk to you about. I wanted to talk to you. We're running out of time now, but I wanted to talk to you about how you feel about true crime today and all the podcasts and the amateur detectives compared to when you started, and the Michael Peterson thing and other cases that you went through. So we're going to have to definitely do this again.
Absolutely. I look forward to it, and hopefully next time on a Zoom so I can see your sweet face.
Well, actually, I can see yours because the phone came up with a picture of you when I called you, so I'm happy that I can stare at you. So, all right. Well, that will be it. Let me end this recording. If you have anything else to say to the viewers, say it now.
I'm just very thankful for having the fans that I do have, and I appreciate the support. You don't realize what it means to me more than anyone would know.
Awesome. All right, let me end this here.
Here's